Hi, Spinna. How are you?
The tape is rolling.
The tape is rolling. I can do this for professional purposes, but hi, how are you?
I'm good.
So thank you for being here, taking the time and the energy to come here from Brooklyn to Queens.
My pleasure.
Thank you, thank you. I hope I can see you. There we go. How you feeling in the middle of the week on a Wednesday, on a non-having gig day?
Well, I'm always working.
Always working.
I actually had a gig last night,
Okay.
and the gigs have been consecutive, so I feel like I'm just in a constant flow of work right now.
Oh, that's a good thing, though. We can't complain. I was wondering, though, how, if you're not on the road, if you're not on tour, what a regular, if there's such a thing as a regular week in DJ Spinna's life would look like.
A regular week in my life, I wish I could say that I had a lot of downtime, but I really just like to chill, you know. I really value rest time because I work so hard. And that could be Netflixing, it could be, reading a book, it could be literally just chilling, literally.
Netflixing, I like the fact that it's a verb now. And also, I gotta say hi to Gabby, the dog, who you might not hear, but she's right here with me. And also, I want to say shout out to Keita, who's also here with us in the studio. So, thank you for bringing everybody. So while I was prepping a little bit for this chat today, I was reading a few interviews and watching what I could find. And it said that you said that you started DJing in 1983 or like mid 80s, if I'm correct.
That's about right.
Yeah,
Yep, that's about
so
right.
that means it's 40 years of DJing.
Pretty much. I mean, don't get me wrong. Me DJing that early doesn't mean I was in a club. It means, it means I was at home figuring it out.
Yeah, but 40 years is 40 years. So I just wanted to say congratulations, because it seems just like a number, but if you really think about it, that's a long time, and a lot of things can happen within 40 years.
Yeah, that's very true.
Yeah. So, one of the questions that I originally wanted to ask you was, what would you have become if you would have not started DJing? Was there something that ever crossed your mind other than DJing?
Not really, because I knew I wanted to pursue music at an early age. Even before DJing was a thing, I wanted to be a drummer or some kind of musician in a band as a kid. So the whole notion of being a DJ or DJing in general, for me, came into existence like as far back as I can remember, like late 70s. But in hindsight, even as a young adult, when I think about my life, if I hadn't pursued music, I'd probably be some kind of social worker.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah, dealing with. I love helping people.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, giving advice and that kind of thing.
Okay, I'll keep that in my mind for my question later that I have. And then within the same interview, I think that I read, you also said that I believe after you came out of college, you told yourself that you was never going to work for anybody else other than yourself.
Right.
Does that, I'm assuming based on what you just said, that means that you already knew that music was your thing, that you only wanted to be in music? Or what made you say that at a young age? Because going out of college is what, 20-something? Early 20s?
Yeah. I mean, I kind of figured out how the world works pretty early and how the system works, and me knowing the power that I had. Like, really, I started pursuing music as a career path in the mid 80s, trying to become part of a hip hop group, trying to get signed to labels. So I've been going into studios since 1985, 86, recording demos with various groups, and then eventually, after years of trying to get signed to all these labels and shopping demos and stuff, I realized that, and coming this close too, like, I recently had, you played for me, right, on the boat. I do these journey parties, but I had Merle and Bob also play for my journey event, and ironically, he was working at East West Records, and it's because of him that my group Jigmastas almost got signed to a deal in '94, and in 94, that was the year, and it was a big letdown. Not in his control at all. It was just corporate entities merging, and the people that were handling my project got fired. So I was like, you know what? It's time to go independent. And at that time, me and my MC Krim and business partner, we formed a label and we decided to press our own records, and that was really the beginning of our independence, my independence as an artist and an independent thinker, and free thinking, and just thinking outside of the system and figuring out how I am going to navigate this new world in music without having to answer to anyone. I knew pretty early on that music was going to be my career path, and that I would be in control of it. But this is after so many years of being let down. I mean, there was a time where I just dreamed of being this major label artist, becoming this, DJ producer star in the realm of hip hop, and, all of that stuff, videos and all that stuff. But independence was really rocking in the mid 90s, especially, around the time of like Wu-Tang, like when Wu-Tang started, when they put out Protect Your Neck, and they, put their records out in all the local record stores in New York before they got signed to Loud. That was one of the testaments to independence in hip hop and how you can really make it on your own. And even prior to that, there were so many amazing independent hip hop records to come out. Even in the 80s, I mean, even in the birth of hip hop, when I think about all the early rap 12 inches that came out before labels really cared, before the industry thought that they could make all this money from it, it was really part of the culture. It was just independence, putting music out yourself. So that's kind of the way I thought about myself in that way as well.
That's dope. I'm just curious, were your parents, at some point, how sometimes people are like, oh, music, I don't know, they want the kids to make sure that they can have not a career, but support themselves. Let's put it that way. Were your parents in one way or the other, that they lean towards one or the other? Were they like super supportive, or were they like?
So my dad, rest in peace, was a very hardworking human being. He was basically working with cars, fixing cars as a body mechanic.
Wow. As
early as 13, 14 years old. So he didn't really understand being a creative and making a living off of it. It wasn't until like maybe the final years of his life where he really got it, because he kind of saw the fruits of my labor pay off in a very special way, actually. And he just didn't get it. It's like he didn't understand how you can make a living from playing records. He just didn't get it. And my mom has always been supportive. She always saw the vision, even, to the degree of schooling and making sure I got into like the right schools that supported talent. However, when I became an adult, and I wasn't bringing in money, like after college, when I came home from school, I went to SUNY Binghamton, upstate New York, and I came back to Brooklyn. I was living on my own all that time, and I came back to live with her until I was able to be on my own. And she didn't really understand the instability, and she knew I was in the music. She always supported it, but I already had my mindset. I saw my path. I knew that this was my way to empowering myself, right? But she didn't really get it. So I used to get some flack, she used to be like, help out with the bills, and I did what I could. But, I think she gets it now.
Now.
I think she gets it, yeah. I think she gets it, yeah.
That's amazing. At what point, what did you tell yourself? Then obviously you just said you always saw the path, right? But at what point were you confident or confirmed to yourself that, oh, I'm making a living off of this. This is my path, or the dream that I had for myself is actually becoming true?
I would say early turning points it's parallel with gigs and the record business. So I paid my way through college doing parties. So for 4 years,
wow.
I pretty much played all of the black fraternity and sorority parties on campus, off campus,
Okay.
and that actually spread to other universities upstate New York, Syracuse,
Okay.
Oswego, Cornell, for 3-4 years.
Wow.
I did radio. I also did radio in Binghamton Community College. Binghamton. It was SUNY Binghamton's radio station, but it was broadcasted throughout the Binghamton community.
Okay.
And this was a great time too, because I was breaking a lot of what would be considered golden era hip hop and even R&B. Like I broke Soul to Soul and
Oh, wow.
played a lot of, En Vogue, Hold On, and all these great records, Tribe, Wu-Tang, all that stuff. Those records were introduced because of me on air.
Oh, wow.
And then once I came home, started getting booked for really good events dealing with great promoters in New York, but at the same time still pursuing making records.
Mm-hmm.
And the turning point on the industry side was I landed 2 great remixes. So because of my situation at East West Records, I had a demonstration deal with East West, and that's where the label gives you a budget to go in the studio and cut some songs and figure out like if it's worth signing you. And Merlin Bob was heading East West at the time. Although the Jigmastas, my group Jigmastas, our deal fell through, I still had great relationships with the people at the label. Shout out to my brother Rick Brown. So I ended up doing a Das Effects remix. That was the first remix that I ever did. And that came to me in late 94, it came out early 95. And then later on in the year of 95, I did a remix for De La Soul for Stakes is High.
Okay.
So, and then I also had a big record on the club market called Everybody Bounce. For those listening who may know the record, it was a big club record. A lot of people thought Funkmaster Flex made the record because he was playing it and dropping bombs on it every week. And I still hear it today, and it still turns the party up.
Is that with the yellowish kind of cover?
No, it's white. It's
White?
white with black letters. It almost looks like a bootleg, but it came out on Freeze Records, which is Todd Terry's label. And it goes bounce, bounce, bounce. Everybody just bounce, bounce,
Oh, okay.
bounce. So that was a big record. It was huge. So that was kind of like
I didn't know that was you.
Yeah, a lot of people don't. A lot of people don't know. That is my record. And that actually broke before the remixes.
Wow.
Because I recorded it in the summer of 94 with my DJ partner that I did all the parties with in Binghamton, Daddy Culture, a.k.a. Nkanza. He played the reggae and I played everything else. And we would go back and forth between genres, but reggae was his specialty, dance hall. But he also produced. So I went in the studio with him that summer in Flatbush and cut an EP. And our DJ crew was called Rude Rhythms. So the Rude Rhythms Experiment, Volume 1, is the EP that Bounce record came out on. And that was my encounter with Todd Terry, which, I got my first SB1200 from Todd. And this was the same machine that he cut, like, all his early, club records, his house records on
That's
Girl, I
crazy.
House You, all of those records. He cut those records on that machine, so he gifted it to me.
Wow.
So I had some pretty stellar beginnings, and
That's crazy. Yeah,
yeah.
sorry. I had to continue. I'm just like looking and I have to let it sink in.
Right. And then, I have that relationship also kind of ties in with my relationship with Kenny Dope, because Kenny and Todd came up together in Brooklyn. He's one of the, forefathers of bridging hip hop with house music. And we share a lot of commonality with music and collecting records and blah, 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 blah. But, when I told him my story about the SP1200, there was a connection there, because on that SP1200 drum machine, there was a sticker that read, Todd Terry Still Rocks. So when I met Kenny about 95, 96, and I told him the story of how Todd gave me the machine, and I told him about the sticker, he was like, you know who put that sticker on the machine? He was like, I put that sticker on the machine. I was like, wow, that's crazy. I wish I kept the sticker on the machine. I took it off.
Oh, you took it off before you knew?
Yeah, I wish I kept it. But yeah, so all of these connective lines kind of shaped my, it laid the foundation for my thought, my thinking, and my journey. Like, I can do this. I could definitely do this.
Okay, cool. You just mentioned Brooklyn 3 times. You said Flatbush and then Brooklyn, where a lot of musicians, producers, DJs come from. And the podcast is called Dance to the Music, and we're going to talk about the dance in a little bit. But I'm curious because, as we talked earlier before, you're born and raised, if I'm not mistaken,
Yes.
in Brooklyn. You still live in Brooklyn. And how, number one, the question is, was the borough and the city, has that ever played an important part in your, I guess, artistry? I could use that word. And number two, if so, how has that changed over the last 40 years that you've been involved in music for you? Obviously, we all know Brooklyn has changed and the city has changed a lot. But just for you, I wonder how, do you still get inspired by the city?
Okay, so to answer question number one.
Yeah, no, that was a lot. I'm sorry.
Yeah, I'm just dialing back. So, yeah, of course, environment, what I experienced growing up, especially in the form of block parties and house parties, all played a major role. And especially like during the Labor Day weekend, we always have our Caribbean Day Festival, Labor Day, parade. And I have vivid memories of just being on Eastern Parkway, parked up with my dad and family, and just hearing sounds. All the sound systems blasting, not just Caribbean music back in the days, but we would hear like disco, we would hear break beats, we would hear, all of the things that make up the kind of things that we like today, the kind of music that we love today, the foundation of that. I heard that growing up. And I talk about this a lot when I talk about my past, but there was a crew called the Laser Rock Disco, who were the local DJ heroes on my street in Crown Heights. They lived, most of them lived on my block, and they did all the block parties during the summer. And I would always be the kid on the sideline just staring and, witnessing and absorbing everything. And they had these speakers built out of pyramids, shaped like pyramids. I'd never seen anything like that ever since then. So, all of these experiences for sure shaped who I am. And also having Latin American, Caribbean descent, parents from Panama, and growing up in Brooklyn, which is culturally, rich, other sounds outside of what is considered American music definitely played a part as well, especially Caribbean music. So, yeah.
Is there any anything specific, and I'm just asking out of curiosity, something very specific to Panama when it comes to music that we don't know about, that I don't know about?
Well,
or when you say Caribbean sound, you mean steel drums?
Being black and Panamanian means that there is Caribbean lineage, as opposed to Spanish from Spain, Trinidad, Tobago, Barbados, Jamaica. So when the music was being birthed from the Afro-Latin community, Caribbean community in Panama, it's kind of it's a mesh of soul, funk, and Latin, all mashed together. It's kind of like, it's almost akin to Brazilian music, Brazilian soul. Same kind of vibe, because they were kind of emulating what was happening here in the States with soul and infusing Latin rhythms, African rhythms, Afro-Cuban rhythms, all mixed together. So it's very unique. It's very special. Funky. There's a lot of soulful and funky stuff coming out of Panama.
Okay, cool. And then to speak about the second part of the question, how do you feel about Brooklyn now? Or I mean, you talked about when you grew up, and now I'm saying, what about now? There's a whole, it's a lot of years in between, but I'm just curious.
Yeah, Brooklyn now. I don't want to, I mean, the reality is gentrification is real, right? So anytime you have new elements coming into a neighborhood that was predominantly black and brown, in certain neighborhoods in Brooklyn anyway, that dynamic will change, and it will also change the party scene. It will change the dynamics of what the DJ outlook is, but it's great to see. I'm all for change if the history can still be connected. So when I see certain DJs still trying to hold on to what makes a great DJ, and kind of studying the history and studying the past and actually engaging with the OGs in the game, it kind of gives me a sense of hope.
Okay.
And it also, I mean, nothing stays the same, right? So there's always going to be new crowds that think differently. They weren't there back in the days to understand what some of the classics are, or even how the music connects to them, because they're experiencing music differently, compared to how we did. I mean, the whole notion of going to a club and hearing like 4 or 5 DJs playing one night, that's a relatively new thing compared to how we experienced DJs back in the days. Like, what made great DJs back then is one DJ all night, or maybe an opening DJ, and the headliner plays 4, 5, 6 hours on an amazing sound system, and you get to experience the journey. And then the crowd kind of gets to adapt to that DJ's sound, that their vibe, their thought process. And we don't really have too much of that anymore. So unless the new DJ has some kind of residency somewhere, where they can tell their story. But again, like, I look at Muscle Cars, for example, right? Love those guys. I love what they're doing, but I know that they were reared in the right direction by the late, great Carlos Sanchez, who, is from the original school. And you can tell when they're playing that they're bringing in that essence, but they also have their own movement, and they do sprinkle in they have their own kind of story to tell in the midst of it, so that it's not old per se. They're just reinventing the wheel, and holding on to tradition, which is important. I think any artist, DJ, singer, producer, whatever it is, it's important to study the history. Yeah, for sure. For sure. I'm going to skip here a few questions, but since you touched on the history part, what is something that
you would advise seeing some of the younger DJs, not just muscle cars, but other younger, or I shouldn't say younger, maybe newer DJs.
Right.
What advice would you give somebody who was not there, 40 years ago, where the music was heard on every block? And there are some pockets where you can, especially
Right.
in the summer, you can hear it, but they don't have that. They don't have that experience of sneaking into the clubs when they were younger, or
Right.
things like that.
Well, it depends on, I think the direction of that question probably needs to be fine-tuned a little bit, because are we talking about addressing these younger DJs as their, like, what is their focus for DJing? Like, how should they, interpret the music? Or
True.
I think what makes any DJ great really is their story and how they play their music, how the music relates to them, and how it comes across to the dance floor. And I think an understanding of music in general is very important. So my biggest thing with any DJ, not even just young DJs, but if you love DJing in general, is really to study music, not just the genre that you love, and try to be as open-minded as possible, because there's so many things. There is a science to it. When you're a DJ, there's literally a lot to think about. It's not just about bang bang. It's not just about playing the hottest tracks. It's really about, your connection. And some people just kind of play music on a real surface level. They're not really internalizing the music. And I think if you understand music in general, that kind of helps with your DJing, because you understand what mood is, you understand what tone is, you understand temperament, you understand like how to tell a story. You actually have so much power when you're in the booth. You're in control of people's emotions, and some people don't really get that, and that's why people on the floor may not, that 360 degree of communication, there's a gap there. They may not feel it because you're not feeling it. You really got to feel it.
Right.
And it comes across, it really does translate. What you give back, it comes back to you. Some people are so internal when they play that they forget, they don't pay attention. They don't care. Like, they just in their own head. So I think it's important really do I make sense?
No, absolutely. Yeah.
I think it's important. Like, I love all kinds of music.
Yeah.
I love it all. And when I'm playing, depending on the party or the genre, I really I immerse myself in the music, and I try to play those genres to the best of my ability, as if I'm part of whatever that scene is. So if I'm doing a hip hop set, if I'm doing a dancehall set, if I'm doing a disco set, if I'm doing an R&B set, if I'm doing a house set, I'm on the dance floor. I'm in the booth, but I'm also on the dance floor, because I want the people. I want to feel what the people feel.
That's interesting to say, for you to say you want to feel what the people feel, and not I want them to feel what I feel. That already goes back to I want to be a social worker. I want to help people.
Yeah. I mean, that kind of makes sense. I never thought about that. I mean, obviously, yes, it starts from within, right? So if I'm playing something, I have to feel it first. I really do try to I made a conscious decision years ago to be one of those DJs that really, I play what I love, and I stray away from gigs where I have to lock into top 40 or whatever is hot. Fortunate enough to have been able to do that and just kind of curate specialty events and themes, because I feel like I have a responsibility to maintain a certain frequency, positive frequency with people on the dance floor. And I think it's paid off. But I also feel like I'm doing a service and providing a service for people.
Yeah.
So I guess that, again, it does go back to what I said earlier, because, you know, that's just how I view it.
Yeah. I want to go back to that moment where, if I did my research correctly, where you said one of your first, or the first clubbing experience for you was at Paradise Garage shortly before it closed, I believe.
Yeah.
And I'm wondering, I'm assuming that was in your teens at some point. I'm wondering if people like me, we only hear about the Paradise Garage, right? And we think that this is the ultimate, or was the ultimate party experience. And I'm wondering, after you went there, did you find yourself chasing that moment, or like that experience, or the feeling, whatever happened? Did you try to find it again afterwards, or were you just like, okay, that was the Paradise Garage? And were you not aware of what it eventually would mean?
I think my experience at the Paradise Garage, it did change my life, mainly because I felt like prior to going there, I dreamt it. I dreamt it through the music. You know, Frankie Crocker, WBLS, used to play quite a great deal of the records that were played there, and that's what I kind of studied. Radio was very important to me. And WBLS, 98.7 KISS, Shep Pettibone Master Mixes, 92 KTU, those are all stations that I listened to. I used to record the mixes onto 8-track tape, cassette tape, study them, right? Then when I was able to go out and actually hear DJs in the street wherever I could, study that. Then I also had Empire Roller Skating Rink, which was, you know, very legendary skating rink in Brooklyn, close to where I live. And the DJ that was playing there, I know T. Scott, legendary T. Scott, used to play there. I don't think I ever caught him. I don't know who was in the booth. You didn't really see the DJ. But these are all early DJ experiences and records and all of this music. So prior to the garage, I was like, man, I just always wondered what it was like. I was also collecting and getting records. My dad used to buy me records, and some of these records had Larry Levan's name on it.
Okay.
Right. So it was just like, man. And then I also had older friends that were members, because I was the young buck. I was the young dude in the crew that went, right? And that's how I ended up getting in was through some of the older guys that are already gone there. And it changed my life because it was everything I dreamt of and more. I was intimidated on the dance floor, you know, but the sound was unbelievable. And one of my memories is riding home on the 4 train coming back to Brooklyn, deaf, like I couldn't hear anything. My ears were shot. I heard nothing but
oh God, that's so
ride.
dangerous.
It was loud. It was really loud in there, but you felt it. And do I chase that? Yeah, I think every DJ that went to that club, or every music lover that went to that club, till this day, the reason why they're still partying is because they're chasing that. They want to feel that. Okay. They want to keep feeling it. Nothing felt like that, ever. You know, we've come close with several venues, several parties. You know, I started going to the Loft way later with Mancuso in the 2000s. Different experience. And I think by now we know one of the reasons why Larry even existed as a DJ was because of Mancuso and the Loft, right? But it's different, you know. It was a little more wholesome because the records weren't being mixed. They were just playing from beginning to end. But that's actually where going to the Loft actually really taught me to pay more attention and not be so fast mixing and let the records breathe, body and soul as well. You know, going to hear Danny Krivit, Francois K, Joe Clauzel, it's not always about the mix. It's always about telling the story and letting the records breathe. So I applied all of that stuff to every genre that I play. Granted, yes, sometimes you got to party rock and you got to go hard and you got to cut through records and stuff, but when the time is right and you let the perfect song with great lyrics that everyone knows play from beginning to end, Mancuso taught me something. I actually got to bond with him when he worked at a store called the Dub Spot. And, you know.
The Dub is on 14th Street? Or there used to be on 14th
Yes.
Street? He worked there?
No. It was a record store.
Oh, okay,
in the
sorry.
late 90s, early 2000s.
See, I just showed my age.
And I lost my train of thought. But
you said you learned something from him when you worked there.
yeah, well, he basically just taught me about sound and how important sound is, and but really the most important thing was, you know, the artist didn't record music. The music that's recorded by musicians and artists, they didn't record it with the intention of you cutting it off. Mm-hmm. Otherwise, records would be, you know, a verse and a hook and then done.
Yeah.
You know, these songs were musicians in a room bouncing energies and ideas off of each other, energies coming up with all of these arrangements and production and amazing tracks, all this stuff. And then as a DJ, you're so impatient to get to the next record, you're just not even taking that into regard. So I've been trying to make this conscious decisions in the last 20 years, when the time is right and the party is right, to just chill, like have patience and let the record breathe. I just played the Clubhouse Jamboree in Prospect Park this past Sunday, and you know, there's a lot of seasoned club goers there. And I like to sprinkle in classics every once in a while, just to keep those folks happy. And I played Hot Shot by Karen Young. Let the whole thing play from beginning to end, and you just felt the entire park light up. Wow. You know, just certain nuances in the record, when she screams, the instrumentation at the end of the song, like all of these things are magical. You know what I'm saying? Like if you really feel music and you really absorb it, it really touches the soul. Did I answer all your questions?
Yeah, no,
Okay.
you did, because you answered more than that one question, because one of them was like, you know, going from playing at block parties and playing in people's backyards and then starting eventually playing in clubs. I would assume that you would have to adjust your DJing, or like it's two different environments to me. So I was wondering if you had to adjust, but you just explained what you learned and what you studied, and I'm also assuming that you applied those then further, right?
Right. But you know what's funny is I also have this other side, which is the hip hop side.
Right.
Which I didn't really speak on that much. And of course, you know, hip hop is youthful culture. I grew up in it. I wanted to call myself a graffiti writer at one point. Can't say that I was nice at it. I did a little pop locking and b-boying growing up. I actually rapped at one point. There's cassette tapes with me rapping.
I believe
on it.
that, yes.
And of course, DJing and making beats and so on and so forth. But on the DJ side, I have a whole other set of DJ influences, and you know, I appreciate the turntablist aesthetic. You know, I dabbled in that as well. You know, I appreciate it. There's an art to it. But when it comes to parties, for me, that's special. That's a little different from doing all that stuff. That's for me. That's always more for show and making an impression on people that get it, and also other technical, you know, turntablists. Right. Being a quality party rocking DJ is different. For me, it's just different. Right.
You just mentioned a little bit that you said you dabbled, but I know you're a b-boy at heart, and I've actually seen you also get down a little bit. I can't remember when it was, but I did see it. So my question to you, now we can speak about the dance part, is how important for you as a DJ when you're in the booth are the dancers?
Oh, 100%.
Do you
100%. That's like the most important thing for me. Yeah.
Okay.
So important.
Right, because I'm asking this question a lot, and you know, even I started as a dancer, so I I always have that in mind, but sometimes I realize that sometimes people, they don't, they don't show it as much. So I'm wondering how, for you, as a seasoned, very, very experienced DJ, how you feel about, what is your first thing when you start a set, even like the dance floor is not packed yet. So how do you even communicate with the dance floor?
It's, believe it or not, sometimes I still get butterflies, even till this day.
That's a good thing, though.
It could be the most crowded event, or it could be a real intimate event, and there's heads there, and it's always about, what am I going to start with? What is the first record going to be? What am I going to do? Because once you set the tone, I'm not going to say it's always easy, but it could be really easy from there once you lock in with the first couple of records, because then you kind of know what could work. Sometimes there's difficult crowds that are hard to read, and you're like, man, I don't know what they want. So you're kind of like all over the place. But usually after the first 2-3 records, and I see there's movement and engagement, I'm pretty secure. I think the most important thing really is going into the party and knowing what your crowd is, and having the kinds of music, the kind of records or music or tracks or whatever files that will speak to them for the duration. Being prepared, but you have to know your audience.
How is that? I can imagine, for example, going to different countries or different cities that you may not play a lot, right? Or you go there for the first time. I can imagine that being more difficult because you kind of don't know the crowd, or you don't even know the place. What do you do in a situation like that? I mean, I guess for you now it doesn't really happen that more.
No, it could still happen because there's always new territories, there's always new venues, there's countries that I still haven't been to yet. But even for the ones that I do frequent, there's crowds change, generations of party goers change. Like, there's a whole new age demographic on the dance floor now. The 40-year-olds, 50-year-olds and up got families, kids, jobs, etc. They don't go out as much. So you kind of got to tap into what this new crowd what they want to hear. And really it's just about speaking to the promoter, getting a grip on what the party is about. Especially for me, like, I play so many different things. It's really important for me to know ahead of time what I'm getting into, so I can be prepared. And really, preparation is key. Just kind of knowing ahead of time what you're gonna do.
Okay. Have you noticed the last couple of years? Have you noticed any changes on the dance floor after the pandemic? Besides people getting older and like the generations always shifting, but have you noticed as far as like a different audience or a different behavior of the audience?
It feels like people, well, at least in New York anyway, and other places I've been to, people were so tired of being locked down or isolated. People they seem to be more excited and more hyped and more engaged and just happy to be out. What was I was looking at something. I think I was looking at old posts on Instagram, on my feed from the pandemic, maybe 2-3 years ago. I think I posted maybe some party clips that happened pre-pandemic, and reading comments and people saying, "Man, I hope we can party again. I hope, I'm so tired of, I'm scared. I don't know if we'll ever get to do this again." Stuff like that. So I'm That's like, crazy. Man, it's almost like we're in a whole new world now.
Yeah.
And I'm kind of feeling that with the events and the parties. Like, surprisingly, it took a while for things to kind of turn around. Like last year, 2022, 2021, when things started to open up, it was really iffy. Like, people weren't certain. But now it feels like people are ready again to be out and partying amongst each other.
Okay. I'm going to go back to something that you mentioned earlier. One of the topics that comes up in these interviews is mentorship. And you already mentioned way earlier that you said you like helping people. But I wonder, how do you feel about the term mentorship? And first of all, what does it mean to you? And how do you feel about it? Especially given 2023, if younger people would like to learn something, right? You can technically find everything, I would say technically, online, and you can teach yourself all the programs and all the things online, but only to a certain degree. So I'm wondering if you personally, if you are mentoring people or have mentored people, and what do you think about the importance of having a mentor or being a mentor to somebody?
I think mentorship is important. I can't say that I'm mentoring anyone directly, but I'm pretty positive that there are DJs learning through my experience and my journey now the same way I did coming up, looking up to the veterans that were around before me. And I think that's always the best experience. Going out and studying not only the booth, not only what the DJ is doing and playing, how they're playing it, but also studying the dance floor and seeing how certain things work, and certain elements of DJing, whether it's how records are being transitioned or just little nuances and how the crowd responds to it. Mm-hmm. I would love to mentor. I just wish I could create. I mean, eventually I will find a way to have some kind of dedicated mentorship program. I'm just really crazy these days with gigs and stuff. But, when people do approach me about it, what I tell them immediately is, come hear me play and go out and hear people that you admire, or just go exploring, especially for up-and-coming DJs. And then, it doesn't matter what the genre is. Like, if you're into specific kinds of music, then go out and study the ones who are playing those records in a great way, like big, doing it big, and get a grip on what makes it work. Because if it's working for them, chances are there's a science to it. And I guess I got to be specific because post-pandemic, it's kind of a different thing now, because there's a optic kind of precedence that's being set for a lot of DJs coming up now, post-pandemic, where, they've made a name for themselves during the pandemic, and now they're getting booked based on the optics. But it's important to study what happened prior to that, because we are walking souls, and that's really what people respond to, is the music and how it's being presented. And if you became blind one day and you couldn't see the DJ, what's really going to cut through?
Right, you still need to feel something.
Right.
Yeah. That definitely, that's definitely important. And I also wonder if, I guess that ties into a question of, like, you kind of touched on it already, what the importance is between the dancers and the DJs, right? I'm wondering, knowing that you started DJing so early, or I should say at a very young age, were you also a person that also, like, went out a lot?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, because sometimes DJs, they go and they play, but they don't really, like, they're not a club head, they're not out there on the dance floor. But I was wondering if you like.
Well, it was exciting times too. So we're talking about an era where these scenes, these club scenes, party scenes, was fresh, new, young, and exciting. And all we really wanted to do was dress fresh, go to the party, and have fun, and listen to great music that made you dance. And I have to reiterate, made you dance, because that was a thing to do back in the days. Like, we kind of, in certain sets of society, we kind of lost the dance. Like, that's why I love house music so much, because the nature of the music is for dancing. And I don't mean going to a club and being on your phone, waving the phone to the DJ. I'm talking about moving, like engaging with the dance floor, people on the dance floor. But to go back to your question, like, yeah, I went out a lot. Now, you know, it got interrupted because I went away to school. But when I had breaks and I would come home, I would go to clubs. But prior to that, in the late 80s, definitely went out. It was great, man. It was, you wanted to go and hear these great DJs on these sound systems and playing all this new hot music, you know? And for me, and a lot of us who came up in that time, what it did was it kind of fueled the DJ market and going to record stores. It was a big community. Like, you would go to the club, you would hear a couple of records, new records being broken, and those records would ring in your head, and the next day you're in the store trying to find those records.
How do you, I mean, I have an idea, but it's just like for people who people who grew up before Shazam, and I include myself, like, we kind of like, did you sing it at the record store, or maybe the radio played it, right?
Yeah.
And hopefully they told you what it is. But how did you find the record on the next day?
So humming a few lines or a few notes definitely helped. There's a store called Rock and Soul, right? And Benji, this is a brother who worked at the store for a very long time, and he was a connoisseur. You would literally go in and hum a few notes, and he'd be like, "Oh, child, that record is not out yet. It's coming out in 2 weeks." He just played it off of reel to reel. You have to wait, you know. Or he'll be like, "Okay, that's such and such. It's over there in that bin." Very, very knowledgeable.
Wow.
And that's what we did. I have a memory of going to see DJ Disciple at a club called the Ritz. This was like 89 or 90, and he played this record called Pacific by 808 State, which is like a classic UK soulful techno record. Never heard it in my life until he played it that night, and it was just amazing, astounding. And then the next day or that weekend, or maybe a week after, I went to a store. This used to be the store called Downtown Records, and he was in the store, and I was like, "Yo, I didn't even know Disciple." I was like, "Yo, you played this record last week," and I was young. I was probably like 19 years old, right? But I was like, "Yo, you played this record," and I sang it to him. And he was like, "Oh, that's such and such and such," and pointed to the wall. The record was right there on the wall. Grabbed it. I mean, you can't beat beat experiences like that.
No,
you can't beat it.
No, for real, you can't. I was just gonna ask, like, what excites you these days? As far as like in terms of playing, but also bigger, like looking into the future. You've played 40 years. What is something that you want to still do in 20 years?
Wow. Well, I've been fortunate enough to kind of develop these special theme events with my wife, Keita. Michael Prince parties called Soul Slam. Wonderful music tributes called Wonderful. We do a 90s flavors party. And I bring these parties up because they've taken on their own life. And, I don't see myself slowing down from doing those anytime soon. Like in 20 years, I do plan to slow down. But these tributes for me and other tributes like them that I play has a bigger meaning, because it's really about keeping the legacy of these great artists going for generations to come, even after some of the people that have grown up with them have grown older or passed on. It's about the next, so that we can keep the history going. But just in general, what excites me about playing is new music. You know, I love exploring and, you know, finding new records, new music, new artists, and supporting them as well. You know, I would buy something if I know the person that made the record. You know, I would still download it or buy the album, whatever it is, because I'm an artist and I know the struggle, right? So, I also feel it's important to play them and find ways to play them. I think Twitch has been amazing as a medium, as a way to break a lot of new music as well. So yeah, and then technology does play a role. I'm not anti-technology, though I love my vinyl and I love playing records and buying records. I appreciate some of the technical advancements that have come out, like with Serato stems, for example, big up Serato, where you can isolate instruments live. It's been freaking people out on the dance floor, like literally, because they'll just hear a song that they know and an element from it just disappear, or, you know, a track that everyone knows and there's no instrumental for it, then I'll just mute the vocal. And they're like, what? Especially if you're a DJ, you know the record, you're like, what happened? What's going on here? Or blending, like taking, you know, live on the fly, acapellas, making acapellas with stems and then throwing it over another instrumental from another record, another artist altogether. Just doing freaky stuff like that, you know, just keeping the dance floor interesting.
That's cool. You actually just answered a question that I have written down. I didn't. I feel like you've told the Stevie Wonder story, how you met a few times already, but I did wanted to mention how, besides you honoring him, and not just Stevie, also with your Prince and Michael parties, not just honoring him, his artistry, his music, and him as a person, but yeah, you just said you feel like there's a responsibility for you to keep the legacy alive, even though he's still here, right?
Right.
How do you see us? Because unfortunately, sometimes what I notice is that younger people really don't know some of the greats, which when you hear that, I'm like, oh my God, really? But it's a reality, right? So how do you see yourself being able to do that? Just with your parties per se, or like are there other ways that you can imagine doing that?
Well,
and if I might add, not maybe just with Stevie, but maybe for more artists of that generation.
Right. Well, for those who may not know, I have a show on Apple Music.
That's right. Yes.
And it's called Here to Their Radio, and I'm doing exactly what you're saying. I honor the greats every week on my show. It's a 2-hour mix show.
Wow.
But I've also been fortunate enough to conduct some interviews. So I've interviewed Gamble and Huff for the 50th anniversary of Philadelphia International. I interviewed Earth, Wind & Fire. I interviewed George Benson. I interviewed Greg Philligaines, who was one of the key musicians, producers, keyboard players with Quincy Jones and Thriller. He played, one of his first gigs was actually on Songs in the Key of Life.
Wow.
I interviewed him for the 40th anniversary of The Dude a few years ago. Most recently, Nile Rodgers for the 45th anniversary of Sashik. Presently, my last episode was Roy Ayers' 83rd birthday.
Yeah, I saw that.
I mean, even hip-hop, I've done an all-Pete Rock show. I've done an anniversary for Mobb Deep. I interviewed Havoc. You know, we just did a whole hip-hop 50th anniversary, and I went through a serious timeline all summer where I started from the very beginning with the break beats, and I went into like indie disco rap, then I went into the two prominent record labels, Sugar Hill Records and Joy Records from that time. Then I went through the period shortly after that, like the electro era. Then I went into the sampling era. Then I went into like the early 80s. Then I went into the 90s, and I did like a native tongue show. I'm doing it all. So all the music that I love and all the artists that should be acknowledged and celebrated, and even some that people may not even be aware that they should celebrate, I'm putting them I'm highlighting them on
every
my show.
week for
Every
2
week.
hours.
Yeah, for 2
How
hours.
much preparation goes into
It's
that?
a lot of prep. It's a lot of prep mainly because of presentation. There's a lot of cutting up of the interview because it's not a podcast. It's a radio show and it's a mix show. So the music is prominent, but the words that are being spoken are important. So I have to make sure that those cut through as well. I did Nina Simone.
Wow.
I did Patrice Rushen. There's a total of 139 shows.
Homework.
To date.
Homework.
139. Yeah.
Everybody go check it out. I have maybe 2 more questions, and then I think we have to wrap it up. I don't even know if that's possible, given your musical knowledge, but I ask every guest to name me 3 tracks that that connects them to dance, no matter what genre and no matter what era. So it's 3, if you can think of 3.
Connect them to dance.
Yes.
Okay.
That could either be very easy for you or very difficult.
Well, of course, that's so wide. But I'll keep it really basic. And the ones that come to mind that always work and also translate to both styles on the hip hop and the house side is Give It Up, Turn It Loose, James Brown, the undubbed live version, to be specific.
Okay.
Hot Music.
Yeah.
In all of its remixes and reinterpretations, all the versions, pretty much every version that I've heard rocks the dance floor. Because once they hear that piano lick, it's like hands in the air and dancers get busy. Always, right? Number 3, let me think about that. Let me think about that real good, because that can go anywhere. You know what I'm going to say? I'm going to go off the beaten path a little bit. I'm going to go with New Eurekan Soul, George Benson, You Can Do It, Baby.
Oh, yay.
Because it's left of center. It's jazzy. It's funky. Obviously, George Benson's a legend. But you have to know how to dance to that record.
That is very true.
Because it's not for on the floor. It's not a it's it's like it's all over the place.
A lot going on.
It's funky. It's you gotta know. If you don't know how to dance, then you're gonna be two-stepping for the most part. Yeah.
That's a very dope choice. And then my last question is actually just what do you like to share with us that I haven't touched on? And I know I haven't touched on a lot of things because I think we could stay here for another couple of hours to really, really touch on like all the things you have done, or just like a majority of the things that you have done, but something that people might not know about you, or you haven't been asked or didn't want to share at a certain point. I don't know.
Wow. What could that be?
And you don't have to either, but I'm just curious, like I obviously prepare questions for me to ask just so I have somewhat of a red line in there, but maybe there was something that we spoke about, but there was another point that you wanted to make.
Well, the thing that comes to mind, I won't say it's about me, but I would say it's about music in general. Music is very precious, and people have to realize that, you are what you eat, you are what you consume. And it's important to have balance, and it's important that we all function as human beings on the highest frequency possible, because that really is what keeps you healthy. Not just food, not just air, not just good water, but what you intake through your ears and how it, translates to the parts of your body. Mm-hmm. I think it's important that we listen to good music. There's only 2 types: it's good and bad.
Very true. And that I think we couldn't have ended it better, or you could have not ended it better. So thank you for that. Thank you.
You're welcome.
I did not say in the beginning, as I usually keep forgetting, but I just wanted to shout out Ladies of Hip Hop and Snipes, who are always providing us with the space for me to come in here and set up shop and be here for a couple of hours. That I appreciate that very much. Thank you, DJ Spinna. I thank you for taking the time again and the energy that it takes to come here. Thank you, thank you. Shout out to Kita. Thank you.
My pleasure.
Maybe we
Thank you for having me.
No, thank you.
Dope.
It's an honor.
You
thank
asked
you.
me some things that I don't get asked, so that's pretty dope.
That is very, thank you. I'm happy to hear that. Yeah, everybody listening, check out all the episodes. And check out all these radio shows on Apple Music that DJ Spinna did, because I have to as well. I'm not going to lie. I think I've listened to one or two maybe, but 130 something you said?
Almost 140. Yeah.
That's wild. And I'm going to end it at that. Thank you very much.
Thank you.